So day 3.5, oof, super fucking amazing. So day 3.5, the owner of the actual company took me to see a friend of his, an old guy who's from the actual region. Like I had some interesting stories, man. But so that guy is a successful businessman in the region. Smart. He's he's good with words, and he also kind of like pointed that character matters in their region. Trust, honor, honesty matter in their region. Although, from my experience, when I went to the market, the people that I met, the salespeople over there, they don't have a problem lying at all. They have certain techniques in how they lie as well, because they tell you the truth about something that's shitty so they can gain your trust. And the minute they do that, they point out the things that are expensive and they basically sell you something that's super fucking, it's super cheap. All they care about is the money. That's everywhere though, but like over there, it's just like they don't hide the fact that they're telling you a lie. They don't kind of like sell it to you in a more like sugar coated way. They just like lie to you about the quality of the subject of something and why it's priced. And they would go give you a different thing and you can't check it. So by the time you go home, you go like, that's not what I ordered. But basically, there's nothing you can do. And so this guy stressed on like the consistency of your character being strong. But when I met him, he basically discussed the same things that everyone basically around has always been saying. How the people are oriented, how they're mindful, how they think, how they process stuff, and the cultural things that are happening. Well, one thing that was interesting about him was like his story. So here's a guy that basically back in the day, the only opportunities that existed was when there was, I think, a war in Iran. He used to kind of be the guys that smuggle goods, like he said Tupperwares, machines, uh, all kinds of stuff. They'd put them on their heads and they'd go on donkeys basically across the actual mountains. And the police on that side would basically be shooting at them because they're not allowed to bring these things in. I don't know if they were banned. I didn't want to research the history. It was a lot. But when I entered his office, like one painting kind of struck with me. It's like it's beautiful. It was a painting of four people, five, five people, and each of them kind of. And at the bottom was the actual like was people with like a were like a, people with a donkey and two people with backpacks like kind of climbing a mountain. So it was like big pictures of faces of people, and basically then the representation of him was at the bottom basically. And as he was telling me the stories and all the, it's just like discussing business, and he was very emotional about it because like a man like him, and it was a decent office, and he had structure, and he hired professionals, and he had like he always wanted to kind of like bring the people that are smart enough to do things differently, or willing to do things differently, or willing to change and listen and learn and all these things, which I think kind of like a lot of people have that intention in them, but they don't really like approach them with intention. Like I want to learn, but I'm not intentionally willing to do the effort, right? And I think that's where like there's a whole lot of missing links in between what you want to do or what you're willing to do. That should be profound. What you want to do, what you're willing to do. I'm gonna take this note. Uh, what you want to do vs what you're. I know almost everyone on YouTube says this, but there's a big difference for some fucking reason. When you derive that conclusion, when you derive something like this, when whatever your thoughts jump from like multiple millions and hundreds of words just jumping around and eventually present themselves in one quote, our growth in our head, I think, happens inversely because growth in our head is literally us simplifying something, whilst growth in the real world is basically expanding on something. So that is basically the sorry, man. Growth happens That's something I need to actually like make a video of today. So amazing. Maybe in the same setting we can actually dive into this shit and get it out. But so the guy basically was telling me about his stories, and then I also, when I was looking at the actual portrait, and I kind of like connected that that was him, but then I wanted to know who the other people are. And then here he basically like explains it to me. The owner explains his points of view on whatever the guy. So there's my guy, my owner, and then there's his friend that we went to see. So his friend was doing all the talking, and basically the owner, my stakeholder, let's call him stakeholder. Let me get used to this word. My stakeholder basically explains his point of view on the country and all that stuff, which again, I kept telling him not to tell me because it creates bias in my head. And if it creates bias in my head, I can't approach the things objectively. It becomes very stupid of him to pay me money when I am very much biased to his thoughts that didn't clearly haven't succeeded. So I need to see things differently. That's why I'm meeting different people. But he just couldn't get it. He just couldn't get it. I don't know if it's an ego thing, a pride thing. I don't know if it's an emotional response thing. I don't know if it's a boss thing because like he kept thinking I had that in me at one point. The only way I got out of it is from my perspective, not being a boss. Like I really was like don't want to I don't want to look at this up down down up thing. I The first thing I did was I think I reflected on how I failed and how if I failed that means I failed in my leadership, and if I failed in my leadership that means I failed in my principles, and if I failed in my principles that means I failed in my opinions. So when I did all of that, then I was like, you know what, man, I have to figure out a way to look at things without my own input in it, unless because like looking at things with your own input creates a certain bias and builds a reality that's not true. But if you're just looking at things the way they are and allow them to happen, then you kind of like establish some form of like base where you can build your opinion on top of. Makes a big difference. But so that guy, when I asked him about the portraits, he at first he basically he pointed at his dad, like his father was the guy at the top. Amazing, full respect and all that good stuff. But the other guy was a guy called Abdullah Pasha, which was a poet in the Kurdish culture. And then he described his story about how he struggled, he suffered, and he was always like vocal and he couldn't care if people were to kill him, he didn't fucking care, you know, that kind of honor thing. Another one was a singer who was a Kurdish guy from Turkey. And he was very popular in Turkey until he decided to stop singing in Turkish and start making music in Kurdish. And then all of Turkey basically went against him. Uh, Human beings, man, I don't know. And then another guy who was a poet, Hanane, sorry, man, I'm butchering the name, Mohriyami, who was also a poet and was also like very much like critical of governments and tribes and stuff like this. And a guy called Yalmaz Ghonna. Oh, Hnain Mohriyani was an Iranian dude. So yeah, and then another Turkish guy who was a filmmaker. And he mentions a quote here that's very strong. Like it's hard to be Turkish if I want for no one. Sorry, man. I don't like writing standing up anymore because I don't tend to understand my handwriting. So this guy Yalmaz Gonna, who's a Turkish dude, was a filmmaker, and I think one of his favorite quotes was, "It's hard to be Kurdish. If it wasn't for if it wasn't for something, no one would have made it." I don't know if it wasn't for me or if it wasn't for us. Yes, 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 yes. So that's an interesting story because I, this guy kind of reflected. So it's hard to be Kurdish. If it wasn't for us, no one would have made it. And the reason behind that is because it's always he looked at the inspiration that their culture gave to everyone around them. And it's I don't know how much history you guys like do, but like my brand manager, my branding like not manager, my branding girl, woman, lady, I don't know. She's young, but super smart. So when she was doing the brand, she was Armenian. So I got interested in her culture. I wanted to understand like how was she thinking and all that good stuff. So I Googled it and I watched a lot of documentaries. But always, it's like if you look at the people that are very much oppressed, most of the feelings of these kind of oppression come from a certain, I don't want to say jealousy, but they kind of like, they provoke something in other people. And an unfair treatment is always a projection of the person that's causing this. And so I think this guy like said it's super beautiful. It's hard to be Kurdish because if it wasn't for us, no one would have made it. And all the other countries that made it basically made it on the back of Kurdistan and the Kurdish people, which in a weird way is true, but like what is made it? Made it is survived. If they wanted to evolve, they would have actually like embraced these cultures around them. I'm not being biased at all. I'm just like looking at the difference between the creativity of cultures. And I completely understand, again, like we're pointing at a genocide that happened 100 years ago. But like the Armenian people were killed basically because they outdid their counterparts. They were artistic, they were creative, they were disciplined. So, and it's that behavior basically was caused by other people being tyrannical. So they had to like evolve in order to become more unique and not be basically not fly away. And then that basically led to their like hate and all that good stuff. But that was like that was one of my most beautiful times. Like that person talking to him actually gave me insight to a lot of things that I didn't expect to get out of like market research, and it made me understand more how basically people get attached to their cultures or like reflect on it or reflect on how they would want to see it and how they would have pride in it and how they would want to like show people a certain evolution and all these good stuff. It was a good morning meeting. So I'm calling this 3.5 because I fucked up on the 4 part. Thank you.